Okay, so we are going to say that we already have a client. We already have a property under contract. And we have a professional service disclosure sample form that you have already given your client. You're supposed to give the professional services disclosure form with your buyer agency agreement, your listing agreement, just so your clients can be familiar with the different services that they could have if they needed. You should go over these with your clients so they are aware of them. With your seller, they're less likely to need most of those services, but it is still a good idea to go over it because that's going to let them know some of the services the buyer could use while they're under contract. And this form is kind of a cover your behind form. And it's also an informational form for your client. You may forget to tell them that, oh, you have a septic, so you should have a septic inspection. If you give your client this form and they look at it, they should see septic inspection on there, and hopefully that will let them know that that's something that they should have if you fail to mention that to them. So while these forms are considered optional for the state, Lantern requires the professional services disclosure for your buyer, and it is very strongly suggested for your seller. And a lot of people, I know it's a tedious form. I know it's a tedious form to fill out, but it's an important form. So with your seller, while it's not required, I suggest it because, your seller is using an attorney, whether it's the one the buyer selected or the one they selected on their own. Fill it out. I use it like if I have a seller, let me open up this form. So if I have a seller, my seller is not going to have a home inspection done, probably. It's very rare that they have a pre-inspection done, but the buyer is most likely going to have a home inspection done. My seller's not selecting to have the home inspection done. The buyer's having it. But if I know who that home inspector was, I'll still put that out here. Just so if in the future that information is needed for whatever reason, I have it. So with this form, if you start at the top, just make sure you have the property address listed on here. The guidelines suggest that that property address be either the legal description that is on the contract, but it should at the very least be the property address, which is probably what I would use. It's a lot easier for me to find a home with property address versus the legal description. However, there are different purposes for that because we know property addresses can change. Your legal description doesn't typically. But so you're going to put the property address up here. Whether you have a buyer or a seller, you're going to put the names on here. It says that the names should be listed as they are on the contract. Real estate firm is going to be Lantern Realty and Development, LLC. That stuff's pretty simple. A lot of times this will pre-fill for you based on the information that's in your loop already, if you allow it to. So this form, I thankfully have not had to have it save my behind. Other agents have. So you want to make sure it's filled out, and that as tedious as it is, you have it filled out to the best of your ability. So the guidelines for it say that if there, for example, is no accountant, CPA, tax advisor, etc., that your client is using, that you have them initial under waived. And ordered by, it says put in A, don't leave any blanks. Guidelines say NA. Okay. Most of the time they're not going to have the accountant, CPA, tax advisor. Sometimes they will. Probably with a 1031 exchange, I could see them having this. And there may be other cases, so fill it out. But if not, just NA. The appraisal, you're working with a buyer, you're probably going to know who the appraiser is. because they're going to make that appointment to go to the home to do the appraisal. But you can also find out from the lender. So you're going to put that in here. Yes, the bank chose it, but in turn, your client selected it as well. So have them initial under selected, ordered by who? That's going to be the lender, right? So you can put lender. I will usually put lender / buyer because my buyer is a part of that process. They're using them. So, but name of service providers, don't just put ABC appraisals. Put as much information as you have, because if you need this, if you need it to save your behind, if you need to revert back to it, you need to reach out to somebody over something, you're going to have all that information there. And you should be giving your client a copy of this form when it's completed as well. So they will have that for future reference, but put ABC appraisal and then whatever appraisers and whatever else you know. So if it is John Smith who came out, put his name on there, put the contact information, right? The phone number, the email, if you have it, if you have the address, put that on there as well. If this is a cash buyer and there's no appraisal being done, then select waived, ordered by, you can put NA, name of service providers NA, or because it is cash and the client chooses not to have an appraisal done, you can put that in here as well. Cash buyer did not want appraisal done, and your client is signing off on this. So attorney, same thing, right? Fill out what you can. If you suggested a list of attorneys, right, at least 3 or more, and your client says, I want this one, and that's who they're going to use, then you're going to put ordered by, you can put buyer / buyer's agent, because both of you, reviewed the attorneys and came to a decision. You suggested them, your buyer selected them. I put both. And then same thing, name of provider. If it's Nip Law, then you're putting Nip Law, who the attorney was, Nick Lovelace, Nip's phone number, email address, whatever. Fill it out as best you can. Same thing with the home warranty, right? So if nothing is chosen for a home warranty, NA, right? So don't skip anything. You have a list of stuff. If they have a pool and you suggest they have a pool inspection done, and for whatever reason, they say they don't want it, and you've done your part trying to explain why they should have it, what's going to happen if something goes wrong with it, or if something is wrong with it, and they still say, nope, decline, I don't want a pool inspection because of whatever reason, then they've waived it. So mark it as waived, have them initial it, and then under where it says name of provider, that's where you're going to put why they waived it. Okay, so if they waived it because they're like, well, it's a newer pool, I'm sure it's fine, I don't want to spend the money, whatever, then you're just going to put in there that buyer, you could put agent strongly suggested pool inspection, buyer has declined, or buyer has declined because whatever. Put that in there, because if something's wrong and then your buyer comes back later and decides they want to, lodge a complaint against whoever, the seller's, the listing agent, you, whatever, and you all get that phone call and now you have to prove your case, and they're saying, well, I didn't know I could have a pool inspection, or my agent told me I didn't need one, or didn't tell me I needed one, you're going to want to have this in with all your documentation to provide to show, no, I did talk to them about it and they declined it for whatever reason, they signed off on it. So it's going to help you in that sense, because there's been cases like that for whatever inspection where where stuff like that has happened, and because the agent had the form saying we talked about it, they did not want that inspection. You have that, and if that happens, have it in an email conversation or a copy of your text back and forth with your client, something that says, I strongly suggest this because what? Because of whatever reason. And, you know, do you still want to waive this inspection, or do you want to have it, or whatever? And they come back and say, nope, don't want the inspection because whatever. Okay, great. So save copies of your communication, because if this comes back, you want this, you want that communication as your backup to the conversation. And that's going to help keep you out of trouble. So, and that's one of the reasons you want to have this filled out properly. And if they don't have a pool or a spa, great, fill in NA. Same thing with the radon. You know, if they don't want to have a test because they just don't think it's likely, or they're not concerned about it, and you've explained radon, you've given them the pamphlet. We do have a copy of the radon information pamphlet in templates in .loop. So you give that to all of your clients, whether they're a seller or a buyer, because, you know, your seller's gonna need it for the next home they get, or if their home doesn't sell, they decide to stay, whatever, you know, they'll be more informed about it. But if they're not, if they choose not to have it, or if they're like, I'm not worried about it, I'll just go to, you know, the hardware store later, get a kit and do it myself. You know, great. Just put those in your notes. Either have that backed up in an email conversation or your text or whatever to go with it. Upload PDF copies of that to your Loop. Keep the stuff together. But go ahead and fill that out. Same thing with septic. So I have some buyers right now, after discussing it with them, they decided not to get a pool inspection. They decided not to get a septic inspection. So, you know, I'm going to have copies of those communications, and I'm going to have this filled out with, they declined it because whatever reason, and they're going to sign off on it. And my little communications where I've advised them and they've decided not to, that's going to be in here as well. Because as much as you work with somebody, and as much as you think, oh, they love me, we get along great, they would never do that to me. Things happen, people's mind change, whatever the case may be. So you always want to be prepared, even if you think like your best buddies and they would never, that would never happen. And sometimes it's, they don't intend for it to happen to you. Sometimes they think, well, if they lodge a complaint against the seller or the listing agent, that's who they're targeting. They don't realize sometimes that you're going to be pulled into that as well. So, but in any case, so fill it out. If there is no septic, great. You put in A, and you can put over there that it's on city sewer, right? So with a septic, don't assume it's never had a septic. If it's on city sewer, just don't ever assume anything. You know, you can always reach out to the county and see if they have a septic permit on file. And if the county comes back and says, nope, we don't have one, or that's too old for our record keeping, whatever, you know, you have a copy of that email to put in here, because I know recently, and I don't know, Alicia, was that you? Who was it? We had an agent that I think everybody thought it was on city sewer, but there was actually at one point a septic system for the house, and the septic tank was in the yard. I can't remember who it was. So that happened to one of our agents recently. You know, the previous few listings said city sewer. That's what people thought. There was actually a septic tank in the yard. So at least do as much as you can to find out whether or not there is one. Well, water quality, same thing. Wood and pest, you know, same thing. Some people, I mean, I know it's expensive when you're buying a house and you have all this money coming out from everywhere that you have to pay for all these vendors. And so sometimes people will not choose certain inspections because of that. It's not the best idea. It's not necessarily the best reason. I understand it, but you just please fill these out properly. Sometimes I get these and, you know, they're initialed and there's absolutely nothing on the whole right side. There's no NA, there's no refuse, there's no, here's the attorney we use, like nothing. And that's not going to help you. That's really not going to help you if you need it. Reinspection of agreed upon repairs. So if that home inspector goes back out to make sure the repairs were done or done correctly, you can put that in here. If your client is the one going back there to look to see if they're done, then put them in here. Insurance, talk to your client. Make sure they know that they need to start working on getting homeowners insurance, flood insurance if it's required. Let them know ahead of time. There's certain things that you just don't think of when you're trying to get everything done, but go ahead and say, hey, have you talked to somebody? If not, I can put you in touch with, one of our trusted people, but find out who they're using, put it in here. Mortgage loan, most of it is fairly self-explanatory with who the vendors are, but there's all these blank spaces right here. You can really put anything in here. So you should be having a final walkthrough before closing, whether it's the morning of closing, the evening before, whatever. So it's best to put that in here, the type final walkthrough and the date that you're going to have it done, or the date and time or whatever. Put final walkthrough. If your client, for whatever reason, says, nope, don't want one, not going to do it, then put final walkthrough and, refused for whatever their reason was, and have them initial that they waived the final walkthrough. You want to use that opportunity to make sure everything's done like it's supposed to. You want to make sure that when the seller took all their belongings out, they didn't decide to take the stove with them, or, those beautiful rose bushes that were out front that you just thought were wonderful. Well, they did too. And they took them, so it's, you really want to do the final walkthrough for different things like this. Everybody's got stories of, things sellers took that they thought they could take that they shouldn't have taken. So just, you need to stress the importance of that final walkthrough. So if you have a home inspection report come back and the home inspector says, I'm not comfortable with this roof for this reason or that, I strongly suggest you have a roofer come out and do a proper inspection. And you talk to your client about this, and your buyer's like, yeah, I'm already paid this much money. I'm sure it's fine. I'll deal with it later. I don't want to pay any more money, or whatever the reason is. If you're saying, you really need to have the roof inspected and they just don't want it, you need to put that on here. Put that in your notes. Home inspector strongly suggested it because of XYZ. Buyer has declined because XYZ. Now, your client is going to see this. If you ever get called upon, and you have to produce this, everybody's going to see it. So whatever you put, please make sure it's professional, because no matter what you're thinking, your buyer's going to look at this, they're going to sign it, they're going to have a copy of it, and you just always try to be professional in your communication. But, and if they do say, yeah, that's perfect, let's have it inspected, great, add roof inspection and who that company is that came out to inspect it, right? Same thing with the HVAC, which I think had its own line. Yeah, so the HVAC has its own line. Home inspectors will check them, but they're not going to do a very thorough examination, if that's the right word. So if you do have somebody separate come out, then have that. So buried oil tank. Say you discover, or the listing agent and seller disclose that there is a buried oil tank on the ground. You do want to have that inspection done to make sure it has either been taken care of properly if it's still there, or if it's removed, like they say it's removed, you're still going to want to have that done. So that's another thing that you should be putting on here. Buried oil tank. If, you know, I think Red Rock is their name, right? Red Rock Environmental. If you have somebody come out to, you know, inspect, put that in there. But these are things that are, I mean, this is all about protecting you and informing your client. So anything that could come back to bite you in the behind, you're going to put it on here. Anything that your client could possibly have done, you're going to want to put that in here. You know, and I know a lot of people overlook it because it's just another form and they don't think it's important, or they really don't like filling it out, which I understand. Suggestion, don't wait until closing day to fill it out. So as these services come about, once you know who the attorney is, fill it out. Once you know who the home inspector is, fill it out. Just do it as you go. It's a little bit easier. And start assigning the fields to your client. You don't necessarily have to send it off to have them sign it, because if you send it out and like if you're up here at the top, you filled out who the attorney is and who the home inspector is, and you have your client sign it, and then you have a septic inspection done, or you find out who their insurance is, and you go to type that information in here after they've signed it. Everybody remember what happened if you do that? So what's going to happen is if they've already initialed the form and then you go to add something else to it, it will stop you and it will tell you if you continue, it's going to wipe out all initials and signatures on the form. So do not proceed if that happens. So make sure you make a copy of the form. You're going to have to add your own text boxes, but you don't want to wipe out those initials unless you are just going to wipe out those initials and have them re-sign it. But I would start filling everything out, prep the signature fields, whether it's waiving or selecting. And then when you think you have it filled out pretty much completely, have them sign it. If there are a few things that you do have to add later, that's fine. Make your copy, add whatever it is, and then add those signature fields. But it is definitely something you're going to do with a buyer of anything, whether it is just land, whether it is a home, whether it is a duplex. If it is a seller, it is, again, it's strongly suggested, right? So fill it out, have it signed, keep a copy of it. It is important, very much so. It is, like I said, just do it. It has saved people many times. I'm fortunate I've not had to worry about it yet. Knock on wood. I don't know if anybody in here or out there has had to use it as far as to protect themselves or to stay out of trouble, but you should be doing this all the time. It's like I said, it's a Lantern Realty requirement for buyers. It's strongly suggested for sellers. Even if the form is considered optional in general, it's not optional with us. And it shouldn't be optional with you. And I know it's a little bit annoying to go through and fill this out because there is so much information, but it's definitely going to be worth it in the long run. Does anybody have any questions about it that I might be able to answer? Like, I know this was short. I have two questions. Nellie.
Well, and they say that they don't want to be put waived on the part where it says ordered by, would that be the agent since they kind of requested or slash?
You can, or you can just put NA. So she's just asking, like, if you suggest, sorry, I'm getting old, so I have to put this on to see my computer here. So if you suggest the well water inspection and they don't want to do it and you have them select waive, she was asking under ordered by what you put. And I mean, you can put that you suggested it, or you can put NA because nobody's technically ordering it. Either one is probably fine. Just make sure in your box where it says name of providers that that's where you're putting, you know, if you're the buyer's agent, then you're going to put buyer's agent. Strongly suggest having the well and or the well water tested. Buyer declined inspection because of whatever their reason is. So that's kind of what you're going to want to do in those spots. Gina, you had a question?
Yes.
Okay.
Once you fill it out and you send it to your client
Mhm.
and they sign it, even if they get a copy themselves because they can and keep it, once they return it to me, should I send it to them like, you already signed this with me, here it is? So it's a kind of sending it twice, but many people don't acknowledge that they have to make a copy for themselves.
Yeah. So so Gina's question, like when this is filled out completely and your client automatically can get a copy of it. But I think that's a little bit, I don't think it's as obvious. Like when you sign something, I don't think it's quite as obvious to our clients that they can have a copy or a copy was sent to them. So she was saying, should we still go ahead and give them a copy once it's completed? Like, here is your copy. And even though it's kind of giving it to them twice, I would, just because I think most of the time they don't realize that, you know, when they sign it and it kicks back that they've signed it, that they can, like, there's a copy of it. Yeah.
What I normally do is a closing folder with anything they've signed, they have it. So if they've got questions, they can go back and look before they call.
Yeah. And so I typically email PDF copies, like a separate email outside of Dotloop. So they're not just thinking it's another whatever that I'm sending them. I'll usually a separate email that says, you know, here's a copy of these documents that you've signed for your records, and attach them as PDF copies. And what Alicia was saying is at closing, what she usually does for her clients is she prints off the copies of everything her clients have signed and gives it to them in a folder that says, you know, here's copies of everything that you've signed. Should you need to reference them or come back to them for whatever reason. So they actually have physical copies. So
Getting things from the attorney anyway or that.
yeah.
So they can keep it on.
Yep. They can just keep it with the stack of papers the attorney gives them. So yeah, you're welcome. And I don't know if anybody online had any questions on Zoom, so I'm going to look. No questions. And I know a lot of people, I mean, they just, I know agents see this as just another form, or they don't know why they have to have it, or, you know, is it really that important? Or like I said, they don't bother to fill out anything but to have a few things initialed. So don't skip the waiving and selecting. So sometimes I see these where they've only had their client initial where they've selected something. So sometimes it's only the attorney, only the home inspection, only the lender sometimes, and everything else is blank. Nothing's been initialed under waived. There's no information on the other side. That's not filling this out completely. That's not filling it out properly. That's probably not going to save you if you have to plead your case, so to speak. Just do it right the first time. Hope you never need it, but know that it's there if you do. It's like I said, you never know when you're going to need it as a listing agent as well. So just do it, because I mean it's that simple. So
One comment.
yes, Gina.
You said that when we're working with the seller
Mhm.
and they say, I don't want to do anything, everything is blank, then later on, the buyer come and do an inspection, should we go to the seller form and put the inspection in the seller?
I do.
But who will at a point initial, because the seller didn't do it?
No, I mean, and they can sell this, so if you're working on a seller version and your seller, has signed off for the attorney that was chosen and any other applicable spots. And if the buyer has a home inspection done and you know who it is, I do suggest going back and putting it on the seller sheet. And for ordered, you can put buyer. I mean, your seller didn't select to have a home inspection done. They can still initial it under waived. And when you put the, when you fill out the information, you can put like buyer side dash name of home inspection company, whatever. You never know when you're going to need that, if you need it, but it's there. I suggest doing it. You don't have to do it. It's your form. It's going to be your behind. You're all brokers. But you never know. And it only takes, if you do it as these things come up, it takes you like a minute to type the information. If you're trying to do this just before closing or just after closing and you're filling it all out and you're trying to get through this whole thing, it takes a little bit of time. And then you're thinking, well, no, who was that appraiser? And you've got to go track down the information or where's that lender's contact information or whatever. And so it just takes so much more time. We work hard for our license. We have to do the education. We have to pay our fees. We work hard for our clients. You don't want to lose that. So I think it's worth filling this out. And again, the guidelines, if you read the guideline form, it does say it's an optional form, but at our firm, the buyer side is required. Okay. The seller side, very strongly suggested. But it's, like I said, just do it. Just do it. Just fill it out, get it on there. This form is for anything. So you can, I mean, that's what all these extra spaces are. Anything extra or unusual that may come up, put it on there. So.
I always just, because I've had a couple that were kind of wonky, add a structural engineer.
Yep.
Pretty much every time, just so they know it's something they can have. So they can't come back later and say, well, you didn't tell me I could have one of those. Yeah, guess what?
Yeah, so
Later.
Alicia was saying she adds stuff to hers, like structural engineer and stuff like that. So, her client can see it. They're not coming back saying they didn't know they could have a structural engineer come out or whatever. So if there are things like that you think of, add them on there, have them, have it ready, go over it with your client. One of our agents was telling me this morning, because she's going to miss this class, but she kept seeing us post about, this is an important document. We're going to have a class on it and whatever. She said she showed it. She got it out, went over it with her buyers, and she said it sparked a fantastic conversation between her and her buyers, over this while she was filling it out. And, I guess, you just don't know what you don't know. Neither do your clients. They're looking for you for guidance. So, and if you think about, if you are a homeowner and you think about when you bought your first home, how much did you know? What did you know you could have done? And if your agent didn't tell you because they don't want to bother with this form because it's tedious, but they didn't tell you, they failed to tell you, and you didn't have something done, you're not going to be happy, and neither are your clients. So it's just, I think about that sometimes when I'm working with people. What did I know or not know when I bought my home? And that's your job, to tell them what they don't know, to let them know, should you choose to skip this, and this is a problem with your septic tank, this is a problem with your pool, this is what's going to happen or not happen because you opt not to have that inspection done because you wanted to save another $150, you know, and now it's gonna cost you thousands of dollars in problems. You know, and if there is something that comes up during the inspection, you know, there's a chance you might get the seller to work with you on having it taken care of. And if they don't, okay, well, now you know, when you close on your home, maybe that's something you should focus on, you know, having taken care of. I see a comment on him. Oh. Did I lose it? Oh. So you're not responsible for presenting the form to the other side of the transaction. And you don't have to request the form be completed by the other side. I would just do it like if I have the seller, I would just note on there that it was the buyer's side who had this home inspection done, and I would just keep it on my seller's form. Anything that the buyers had, done, I would put it on my seller form because there is a seller version. Surprisingly, it looks just like this, right? Buyer or seller. The only difference is when you go to pull the form, in parentheses, it says buyer or seller. But if this is my seller's form and the other side had a home inspection, once I find out who that is, I'm going to put ordered by buyer, even though it's my seller form, and / buyer's agent or whatever, buyer. I can still mark it waived because really my seller didn't choose to have that. But over here under name of providers, I'm going to put buyer side or something to let me know it wasn't my client, it was the other party that did it. And then I'm going to continue on with who that home inspector was and their contact information. So it's more for you and your client. What that other side does, the agent and their client, you know, that's on them. But you definitely want to make sure you're protected, and you may need to come back to it because what if you have the seller and the buyer terminates and they've had all this stuff done? You know, you may be able to not access that information, but you might have to reference it or say, well, I know this company came out, maybe they'll tell me what was wrong with the septic tank. You know, maybe they will, I don't know. Maybe they can't, but you at least have that information, you know, those inspections were done. And you can always make a copy of this form in your loop so that if your client does fall out of contract and gets a new buyer, you know, you have this form, you can make a copy. You can just go into your, well, you can't do it from here, but from in your loop, you can go over to your little extra dots and tell it you want to make a copy of the form. And then just put another copy in your file and archive the old one or whatever. But I would do it. Every little piece of information is going to help. Every little piece. So, anything else? No more marks. It seems like a simple enough form. It's just intimidating to people just because it is so tedious to fill out. But the more information you have, the better protected you are. So just do it, submit it, keep a copy, protect yourself. So that's pretty much it. So if nobody has any more questions, I'm going to tell y'all to have a fantastic Tuesday or a terrific Tuesday. And you know, good luck on having some good transactions. We've got a little bit of time left in the year to get them in. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
You're welcome.